Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by Arcat. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guest today is Richard Olcott, Design Partner at Ennead Architects in New York City, with offices also in Shanghai and Los Angeles. Over the last 4 decades, Richard has developed an award-winning body of work for leading cultural, civic, and educational institutions around the globe. His work is grounded in the power of architecture as an interpretive medium, one that can communicate the complexities of contemporary society and create a lasting cultural impact. Some of his notable projects include the Bing Concert Hall at Stanford University, the Anderson Collection at Stanford University, Yale University Art Gallery renovation and expansion, Zankel Hall at Carnegie Hall, the New York Times printing plant, WGBH headquarters in Boston, and the William J. Clinton Presidential Center. He was recently inducted into the National Academy of Design. The project we will be talking about today is the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center in Washington, D.C. Commissioned in 2019, the Hopkins Bloomberg Center is the brainchild of Ennead Architects, Rockwell Group, and SmithGroup, who seamlessly melded exterior and interior elements to create a dynamic space unlike any other. The building, often described as a vertical quad, features an array of amenities including a theater, café, conference center, libraries, student lounge, and active learning classrooms, all interconnected through a series of innovative design concepts. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome to Detailed. My guest today is Richard Olcott, Design Partner at Ennead.
Correct.
I did it, yes. At Ennead Architects in New York City, with offices also in Shanghai and Los Angeles. The project we're going to talk about today is the very cool Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center in Washington, D.C., which I am very excited that I'm going to be in D.C. in June. And I just found out I get to go see it in person. Richard, welcome to Detailed.
Thank you.
You so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Weather better, good over there?
Weather is warm finally today, yes.
Here too. That's
Yes.
a miracle. Rainy country and we're doing good.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get into this. I always start every episode with some kind of icebreaker question. And usually it's something silly, but there was so much going on here that was cool that I decided you weren't getting a silly question. In our communications in preparing for this interview, one of the terms I saw in the things I was reading was radical reuse. And that's the first time I've heard adaptive reuse kind of phrased that way. So set the stage for the project we're talking about today, and tell me about radical reuse and why it's important.
Okay, so I guess I've always found the term adaptive reuse to be a little inadequate for some of the buildings we've been thinking about, like the one we're about to talk about. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. About 20 years ago, I was fortunate to win a Rome Prize, and I went to Rome to the American Academy, and I studied what I would call hybrid buildings. And by that, I would mean a building that has been radically transformed to something that is beyond what it was originally and has become something else entirely. For example, the Bath of Diocletian, the Roman bath, was changed by Michelangelo into a Renaissance church of completely different use. Or the theater of Marcellus was a Roman amphitheater, which then became a medieval fortress, which then became a Renaissance palazzo, and is now a very fancy apartment building. So these are buildings that long since have lost whatever semblance they had, their original configuration, and have become something entirely different. So,
I love the term. I really do, because when I read it, I knew exactly what you meant, and I'm sitting there thinking, why are we not just calling it that? Because adaptive reuse, in my opinion, is taking a building and maybe adapting it for some extra use, but it's not changing it from one thing to a complete different thing, which
Correct.
this project is.
Correct.
So along those veins, this project was originally the former museum, an American museum, now turned into an academic center. Give me a little history here on this building and why Johns Hopkins decided to take this route.
Well, so the first interesting fact probably is that we designed the original building. So this is for us a very unusual occurrence where we renovated our own building. So that is why Hopkins came to us in the first place, since we know where all the bodies are buried and know everything about the building. And I would say, I mean, I know that, they've always had a presence in Washington D.C. In the northwest part of the city, in a bunch of not very adequate buildings. And I think when this came on the market, they jumped on it because of its location. The newseum, I think was finished in 2008, and it was a museum of journalism and dedicated to the First Amendment. But it cost $25 for a ticket to go to the museum in a city of free museums, so it was never a very good business model, probably. So they decided to sell the building, and Johns Hopkins jumped on it primarily because of its location on Pennsylvania Avenue, halfway between the Capitol and the White House. This fantastic location.
I actually did a little homework on that, and I was surprised because I wasn't familiar with the museum when I looked it up. I wanted to know when the building was originally built. That's what I was looking for. And my anticipation was it was something built way back in the day. And I didn't realize that it was a newer building until I went and looked up the original building. I am intrigued. I was reading through your things. When I was reading through your project description before I started really digging into the project, I was really intrigued by the statements I kept coming across: vertical quad, room stair, bridge, a beach, among other things. Broadly describe to me what all is included in this building.
Well, so that's, again, the big reason that they purchased the site. The primary user is the Hopkins School of Advanced International Affairs, Science, rather. And so that's their big foreign policy, foreign affairs school, very prestigious. And for it to be right in the middle of the federal city with all of these embassies and, government buildings around is ideal for them. It also has their business school. It has various other departments, including a beautiful auditorium that their Peabody Institute uses for music. So they've really been able to consolidate about 8 different programs and have a major Washington, D.C. presence in this location.
I am blown away by that auditorium, by the way. That was one of the things I left out of my questions. It's like, how did I leave that out of my questions?
That was one of the things that was radically transformed, because it used to be kind of semicircular, and now it's a shoebox, which makes much better acoustics.
So I'm going to stray for a second. I do this, so you can tell me if you don't want to answer my question. Tell me about a couple of the spaces in the building that were radically transformed.
Well, so when you asked about the room stair, room bridge, the beach, these are elements that were, the beach in particular is something, if you ever went to the Johns Hopkins campus in Baltimore, or the sort of central quad, there's a big oval lawn that's sloping, and it's called the beach, and it's the kind of place where everybody goes. So one of the innovations that we were able to work with in this project, in particular with David Rockwell and his people, was to kind of recreate that central gathering space as basically a step stair kind of bleacher seat thing, and it's called the beach because it's very similar function and kind of idea of place. The interior was transformed as much as the exterior. In particular, it was once just a big atrium with a flat floor and a few things hanging in it, and a giant window that you could see from Pennsylvania Avenue. And it was effectively a big party space. And now it has been injected with all kinds of new programs. So there are literally classrooms and meeting rooms that are floating inside of the big space. And that's what is being referred to as, so the room stair is a series of classrooms that have a stair winding around them all the way up and down. And the bridge one is literally a bridge that has a conference room hanging from it. So those are all things that activate the atrium in a kind of amazing way.
It's an incredible space. I think the first thing that really grabbed me was when I looked at one of the exterior pictures, and it was a picture taken at night, and that stair is all lit up, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, just grabbed me right out of the chute before I even started. I want to talk about that project. It's really pretty. So this building is a stunner. The exterior was completely reimagined. Tell me about the design vision for the exterior of this building, and what statement were you trying to make?
Well, I think if anything, we're trying to make a new statement. And Johns Hopkins is very concerned that people not think of them as, oh, they're in the old museum building. And so they were looking for a new identity. One of the things the old building had was a giant plaque that had the whole First Amendment written on it in stone, about 75 feet high. It's a huge surface there. And that kind of identified it as the museum immediately. That and the big window looking into it. It is also, I should point out, on this part of Pennsylvania Avenue, it is in the company of some very important buildings by very good architects. Next door is the Canadian Embassy by Arthur Erickson. Across the street is the John Russell Pope National Gallery of Art. And next to that is I.M. Pei's East Building of the National Gallery, which are all super famous and beautiful buildings. So, this is a pretty fancy neighborhood. You have to kind of, straighten up, I think, when you build in a place like that. So, but primarily what I said in the beginning, to make a new identity, a more progressive one for Johns Hopkins, and to be a better neighbor with those other buildings was our goal.
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Boy, I can only imagine. So I understand that this building filled the zoning envelope.
Yes.
So did you have to do anything unique in your design, or did that present any challenges with this radical reuse of the building, not having any more extra space?
Absolutely.
On the exterior?
Washington is the most overregulated city in the world. One of them. Every cornice line, every elevation is specified very, exactly. And that building fills that envelope completely. Then there was the big window that was actually a big kind of recess. And we needed more square footage in the building. So it's about 420,000 square feet, the whole thing. We actually removed a great deal of floor area and then put it back, and we're able to infill the big window and get that additional square footage, putting more program on the facade, which is actually classrooms and meeting rooms and lounges. So we did everything we could to kind of work within the existing envelope to get more square footage, because we were not allowed to go out beyond it by 1 inch.
I can't even imagine it. It must have been very helpful that you did the original building.
Yeah. Well,
let's see. So let's get a little bit more technical about the exterior of the building. Describe for me some of the exterior design features, site features, material choices that you made to make it the way it is now.
I would say that the primary one is Tennessee marble. And the reason for that is that both the National Gallery and the east wing of the National Gallery are Tennessee marble. So we use the same stone from the same quarry. So that right there kind of brings it together and makes it work as a better neighbor to those buildings. The previous building was primarily a glass building, and I think it was always a kind of outlier on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is much more of a masonry and stone avenue. And that was something that the one of the commissions we were charged, with going through was very concerned that we maybe fix that issue a little bit and be a better neighbor. So the way that primary material of stone is it gets you halfway home already, I think, just by changing the main material of the front. Then we changed a lot of the glass. There's actually a lot of that glass was previously single layer and not sustainably, performing well at all. It's all now with inner layers of copper mesh and things that block down the sunlight and, again, make a warmer palette that works with the kind of masonry, brick and stone that is on the avenue. So those are all devices to try and make it fit in with the context that's around it.
Did you do anything with the site?
I mean,
or was there really nothing that you could
actually,
do?
That's not true. We did completely rework the ground plane and made it much more user-friendly. There's a whole new set of planters and seating areas. There will be a café that opens out onto the wider part of the sidewalk. It's not finished yet. So I think Hopkins was very concerned that they'd be much more welcoming to the public than the previous building was. And that's also at night as well as in the daytime, because there are lots of evening programs. And that makes everybody very happy, because at night, Pennsylvania Avenue is pretty dead. It's more of a daytime place.
Yeah, I've been there. Definitely more of a daytime place. So I've always felt that, reimagining an existing building or doing such a radical reuse as you've done is far more difficult than just designing a new building, which obviously wasn't an option here anyway. Tell me about what you call major interventions in the building. What does that mean, and what did you do?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that the museum is a purpose-built museum in which you came in, you bought a ticket, you were ushered downstairs to an orientation theater where you watched a little film, and then you were ushered into an elevator, and you went straight to the top of the building, and then you worked your way down through a series of galleries. So a prescribed sequence, very careful prescribed sequence, only one way to do it. And that's about the opposite of what an academic building needs to do. You think that every hour everybody wants to go every which way. So we ended up, therefore, and by the way, those floors a lot of them were offset, by half levels. So we removed a lot of floor area and then put it back. We completely changed the auditorium that we spoke about earlier. We filled in that window with new floor area. We completely removed 3 giant elevators that were in the atrium, the original atrium, and built an entirely new elevator core with 6 elevators north of that. So there's a huge amount of demolition, selective demolition that went on in there. Usually you think of demolition as just, let's just take this out. This was more like brain surgery than demolition.
It sounds like, at least in some areas, you were almost gutting it.
Yes.
That's a lot.
True.
That's a lot. What did you implement in your design to make this building tighter and more energy efficient? I know you mentioned the glass, because you're targeting LEED 4.0, BD&C Silver certification. So not just the enclosure, but sustainability as a whole. What things did you do to be able to work towards that?
The whole new mechanical systems, all new glass systems, as I mentioned. Certainly all the lighting was redone. Lighting has changed so much since 2008. It's far more efficient. So basically everything they could do, they did, to try and improve that. A lot of green roof planting area up on the upper levels. Those are all things that would make it more sustainable.
I love to talk about challenges. I don't call them problems because I've never, in all the years I've been in this business, I've never worked on a project that didn't have challenges. It's just the nature of the game. And I think we learn the most from those challenges as well. One of the things that I was really interested in is this site is so highly regulated. And you had a list of different agencies that were involved in the process with this project. How did that affect your project and your collaboration and your communication? Because you also have 3 architects.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the regulations are pretty much exclusively for the exterior of the building, fortunately. And we were the ones charged with designing the exterior of the building and also getting it through all of those agencies. And there are a legion of them. The Commission of Fine Arts is the most important one, the National Capital Planning Commission, the National Park Service, the State Historic Preservation Office, et cetera, et cetera. And, I think it was an open question for Johns Hopkins that what if they couldn't got this approved? Are they going to still buy this building? So that was a kind of chicken or egg problem for a while there. And the most difficult was the Commission of Fine Arts, certainly, who were the ones really charged with making the big aesthetic decisions of places like Pennsylvania. And they were the ones who said, you need to this is an opportunity for this building to become a better neighbor to this historic context. And they held us to that. And we had to convince them of that. So conversations with things like stone, that's how that came about, was solving that problem for them. And they control every aspect, every material choice, every brick, everything, is a subject to their purview. So not easy.
I as a spec writer, I'm just thinking about, I don't want to write the specs for that building. Yeah. I can only imagine. How long did
that process?
Going down a rabbit hole, how long, if you were just going to wild guess, how long would extra time do you think?
Extra time? I don't know. I mean, I think it was about a year overall from because you have a series of hearings that you have to go to, public hearings, and then private committee meetings. And also during that time, the makeup of the commissions changes. You have different people you're talking to, which makes it even more complicated. So the better part of a year it took, but we were all working, on other things during that time.
So I want to talk a little bit about construction, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. You get your design done, you're all ready to go, and sometimes you get in there and things don't exactly work the way you expected them to, especially in any kind of remodeling or renovation or
Absolutely
radical reuse.
Yep.
And so talk to me a little bit about the construction phase and, what did you, you start, how it is, you start ripping out walls or floors, and sometimes you find things you didn't expect to find. You guys were lucky enough to be the original designers, so I'm sure that helped. But how did construction go?
Well, I would have to say
staging as well.
I mean, I would think most importantly is the collaboration with our genius structural engineers, Lyra, who designed the original structure for the building, which includes big trusses and things that are spanning across the atrium, a very sophisticated structural system. So they're the only ones who knew how to take it apart without it falling down, literally. If you talk to the construction management people, I think you'd find they lay awake at night thinking, I hope this thing doesn't fall down, because they were doing that much. You have to shoring up all kinds of parts of the building. If you're taking out the columns that are holding it up, it's a pretty scary thing to do. Very careful, very thoughtful, extended sequence of selective demolition, piece by piece. It took almost a year to do that part.
Wow. So what would you do differently if somebody came to you with another project that required that, similar kind of work the next time from what you learned on this one?
I think I'd hire a good engineer like that, first of all, because that's the most important part. The other thing I didn't mention, the backside of this building, even though it's a 400-some thousand square foot museum building, the north side of it has 150 apartments as part of the building that are not part of this project. So those all had to stay there. I hate to think how much those people were disturbed, but we're literally taking down the building right behind them the whole time. They're living there. So that makes it even more terrifying, the whole thing. Anybody in their right mind would probably just want to build a new building because it's so much easier, but it's absolutely, I commend Hopkins for, certainly they wanted that location, but it's a much greener thing to do to fix an old building because it already exists, and to build a new one. So it's a kind of admirable exercise. And I think it's one we should all, we look around our city and see plenty of empty buildings that you could imagine could get radically reused in different, more creative ways, hopefully.
I'm definitely, it seems to me, seeing a lot more of that these days.
Yeah, you are.
Even some drastically old buildings being really just turned into something completely new and updated, but still an old building.
Well, that's the irony of, lots of the older buildings are the ones that are much better made and last longer. And now they've come full circle to become something else. So they can become something else because of that. So
from a design standpoint, what would you say that was the most difficult thing to work out in your design for this building?
I would say working with, getting the number of classrooms that we had in there and getting that mix to work properly. It was literally a puzzle to fit that all in there. It's a kind of a new paradigm for a university building. It's kind of like a high-rise quad. When you mentioned the term vertical quad, that's what we meant by that. It's kind of a typical university quad turned on its side. So making that work is a different kind of thing. There's a lot of people in there that need to, move around it. It's not like college when we went to college at all. Okay.
No, I don't think I've seen a college that looks like that before. And I'm looking at the picture of that vertical quad area, the long picture that you can see the stairs or the beach. Yeah. You can see the beach area and each of the floors up on the side. And I'm assuming what I'm looking at, that thing at the top, is that kind of suspended.
The floated room? Yeah.
Yeah, the floated.
Yeah.
That is just, it looks like it's floating up there.
It literally is hanging. I don't know if you can see, it's got two kind of hangers. It's literally hanging from the bridge above it. It's pretty amazing.
Like a thrill ride, right? Hey,
yeah.
I don't know if I want to go in that room.
Yeah.
No, it's an amazing space. I mean, who would not be thrilled to, well, college is enough work as it is to be able to do it in a space like that.
I have to say, that David Rockwell that is what he brought to the party, was, since he works in the theater, this whole idea of people looking at other people and people interacting, around a big space like that, as opposed to a typical atrium that you see that's just circulation. But by really putting people in it, in the middle of it, literally, it makes it much more engaging for everyone.
Well, we don't do enough of that these days.
Yeah, exactly. given the, COVID, everyone thinks they can learn remotely, but there's no substitute for being in a place with other people and learning together. That's the whole point.
What's your favorite space in this building? Like, if you had to pick one or two even that are that you just get a sense of joy from walking into that space, what would you say your favorites are?
I'd say the theater, certainly, but I'll tell you what, the roof. The best thing in the building is the view. And the view is a knockout. When you go up to the very top, and the Capitol is right there. It's just astonishing. And you can see it actually on the fourth floor is a series of classrooms, one of which has a big window facing the Capitol. And it's just spectacular.
I saw that picture. I'm like,
yeah. You can't believe it. It's like, oh, I know where I am now, right? So
serious real estate there.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go down another rabbit hole. You mentioned the roof. Is there any amenity space for the students on the roof, or is it just a roof? And because you're the architect, you get to go up there and look.
No. There's actually 3 roofs because the building steps back higher as it goes away from the avenue, and up there is a whole conference center, kitchen. So they could have big events. I went to a Bloomberg event that was it's called City Lab. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And they get mayors from cities from all over the world. So they had like 200, 300 mayors from literally all over the world. And they're having a conference all day, then they have dinner, and they use all those terraces to kind of go in and out. It's very lively. It's great.
So working for an enclosure consultant, I have to ask, what kind of roofing system, how do you handle your roofing system when you're doing something like that? Did you put a new roof on the building?
Well, there's all there's a whole membrane roof on the top of which is a whole paver system and planters, and it's completely redone, the whole roof. It's really, there's some wood decking, lots of great plantings. It's really nice space.
I would imagine the students love that.
Oh yeah.
Because that is Pennsylvania Avenue. You're right in the middle of very much a city atmosphere.
Yeah.
And to have a chance to have somewhere you can go to get some fresh air, be outside, on a break between classes, whatever, and probably up on the roof, you feel a little bit more removed.
And there are other terraces, one on the 2nd floor, there's one on the 6th floor. There's all the stuff at grade. So there's much more kind of amenity space than there was before.
So before I get to my closing questions, is there anything else you'd like me to know or you'd like to share with our listeners about this building?
Only, I think, just to touch on that idea that I think we all believe that it represents a new typology for universities, and one I hope we see. It's a real urban campus that's different. Very different. And a lot of that has to do with the way you learn now. Like a library, there's a big library, but there's no books. It's all digital. So, but there's somebody you can talk to, but that's the definition of a library now. It's like a comfortable place to read with somebody who knows what they're talking about you can talk to. So there's lots of new, very different things going on as the future is here.
Yeah, call me old school. I still want those papers in my book. I want that paper and that. I never could get into any of the Kindles, or not when it comes to reading.
Yeah,
I need my books, but I've done a few interviews on some major university projects. And I am seeing very much of a trend of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just really, truly reimagining what that experience needs to be. And I love that because I think we need that. Times are changing, and I think our education system has to change with it. And I think maybe we've been a little bit behind for a while in some of the things in keeping up with the way that we're educating our students these days. So I usually close with a couple of closing questions. One's a broad industry question. And I was particularly interested. So communication and collaboration, we know, are everything in the work that we do. That building doesn't happen unless we do that well, or it doesn't happen smoothly if we don't do that well. On this project, Ennead, Rockwell Group, and SmithGroup all played a part in this project. 3 firms. Um, Looking back on that process, what advice would you give another firm that was looking to do a project with a similar type of collaboration effort? Because you had all the agencies and all that stuff on top of it as well. What was your recipe for success here?
Dialogue. I think that's something. It's actually a kind of Bloomberg hallmark. Is where this comes from. It's one of Mike Bloomberg's ideas, is to go find a bunch of smart people and put them in a room together and make sure they talk to each other. And we had not worked together before, so it was not so easy at first, I think. But there was also on the one hand, you could say, well, we were supposed to do the outside, and Rockwell was supposed to do the atrium, parts in the inside, and SmithGroup was supposed to be the architect of record and do a lot of the classrooms. But in fact, it was far more porous, the boundaries, than that, as it should be. And we worked together on all those things. So we contributed to the interior, they contributed to the exterior. We worked together, and it was fun. It's a team sport, what we do. So that's the way it has to be.
I love hearing that you said it was fun. Because my initial reaction when I saw that was, three architects,
yeah.
3 architects in one room, and they've got to agree on a design. That should have been interesting. Your designs are very personal, and you very much take them to heart. And so I've been in rooms full of architects, I don't know how many billions of times during my career. And it's not always easy to get more than one of them on the same page.
I think if you have the willingness to learn, to listen to somebody and learn from them, you might be much better off. It's really interesting. Someone like David, they work on very different stuff than we do, and there's a lot to be learned, and vice versa.
That's an amazingly great piece of advice.
Yeah.
I think we forget to do that more so today than ever before in our rush in tight schedules and tight budgets and all of that. We sometimes forget to just sit down and trust that that person in front of you has a different set of knowledge. And when you bring those together, both people
and you get something different out of it, something new. Yeah.
So final question, and everybody on my podcast gets this question.
Okay.
It could be this is my own personal end to every podcast because I'm curious. So we all hope to live a life that somehow makes a difference or has some meaning for someone somewhere. My question for you, personal or professional, doesn't have to be related to this project or even architecture if you don't want it to. How do you as an individual hope to make your mark or impact or a difference on this world?
I think I'd say it's both personal and professional. That's why we come to work every day. That's what we believe architecture should be in this office. Our senior partner, Jim Polshek, who passed away last year at the age of 92, always talked about architecture as a healing art, as a piece of the social construct, and dedicated his life and work to building in the public realm. So we don't ever do, trophy houses for billionaires. We don't do that kind of stuff. We do buildings that try and make a difference. And that's what gets us up in the morning, to do that, to make whether that makes a musician play better or in a concert hall or a scientist, laboratory is, going to make him achieve better and discover something. That's why we want to provide the means for that to happen, those things to happen.
Well, I think you did a darn good job of it here.
Well, thank you.
Because if I could go back about 30 years, I would kill to go to school here. And space does matter. And I know that I have been emotionally affected by spaces that I've entered in my life. And I know that a good space changes my whole frame of mind when I'm trying to work in it or play in it or whatever. And it does make a difference, more so than I think a lot of people maybe think.
And the
about.
opposite is also true, unfortunately, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So beautiful project. Like I said, I'm going to be reaching out to you because you have to get me in.
I'm going to get you in.
I would love to see this building. I'll be there for the AIA convention.
We're giving a tour. David and I are going to be giving a tour, so you should come. Right.
Okay. Well, so is this on the AIA schedule or is this some secret private thing I need a special?
No, it's on their schedule.
Oh, well, I'm going right back into my registration.
Sure, yeah.
And finding if it doesn't conflict with, I'm actually going on behalf of the podcast, not work. And so I'm going to be doing some interviews there. But if that doesn't
we'll be
conflict,
there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe I can even sneak a few sound bites and video while we're going on the tour, and we can do a little bonus episode.
Okay.
That would be great. I never get to go see most of the projects, so that would be awesome. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this gorgeous building, and I look forward to seeing you in June.
Likewise. Thank you.